I was thinking about those colors.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about the ending of Mass Effect 3. And I'm going to need some more time because it's fresh on the plate. This is just me verbal dumping, by the way. So, like, cut me off if I need to be cut off, please.
Okay.
You have the cane. No. I was thinking about the colors, and I was thinking about the endings, and I was thinking about how I was like, yeah, the moment we hit it, and then we cut back to us, and we're talking about it, and I'm like piecing it together, and I'm like, I can tell what I didn't like, and I can tell what hit me the wrong way. And I can also feel like what it would have been like with the extra context removed. I'm like, oof, yeah, that's a rough thing. It's kind of like when I got to the end of KOTOR 2 and found out what the content removed would have been like, because that game has a similar situation where like you have to hack the good stuff back into the game.
Okay.
And by default, it's really rough or whatever. So in this case, there's an improved state to the game. And yeah, and I was kind of able to identify that. I'm like, yeah, to me, the thing that bothered me the most, even with the extra context about how things played out, was the cynical nature. I said is of how all of that played out.
And you still stand by the choice of word cynical?
I still stand by the choice of words. In fact, the reason why I'm even bringing this up right now is simply because it's fresh off my mind. It's top of brain, and I want to double down on my take.
Okay.
I said that, like, yeah, I feel like it was surprisingly cynical with how it approached everything, because each of the pathways that are provided for you are either jaded because the developers are salty about your choice there, or they feel like to some degree one of the villains you were fighting against is actually philosophically right, and you just have to kind of lean into that. And because Mass Effect is about choices, I can imagine the idea was, well, this is the ultimate choice, right? We will provide you with the thing the game has been about, and so that's how it rolls through. But I think the reason why that felt bad is because yes, the game is about choices, but the reason why we even care about choices is because we believe that choices have consequences. So when it comes to the idea of a final choice, it shouldn't so much be a final choice when it's the end of a trilogy. It should be a final consequence. And I think that the way that plays out could have, like, I was talking about how, this is where I feel like it fails, but I couldn't put my finger on what I think would have been better, because I don't know, because that's a lot of dominoes falling in a lot of places, and it's a very complicated thing. And when asked and sitting here thinking about like what would have been the right way to go about it, we kind of were like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you wrap that up, right? But and I don't envy the task.
Is it possible that with the path there was no way to end that properly?
So that's what I don't know, but I'm thinking about what I would have felt satisfied with. Right.
Okay.
And open question. And as someone, I'm not a writer, but like, what are the notes that would have felt satisfactory to the conclusion of this massive rolling story over the 3 games? I think the idea of, again, your choices have consequences is what we want to roll with. Right. And then the most interesting thing that I pointed out at the time when we were looking at each of those choices was the idea that, what if you were somebody who was kind of faking that you believed robots had their own autonomy, right? And what if you were challenged to now prove that by saying, actually, let's wipe them all out, right? So when you have the destroy ending, the red, that's of all the things proposed, that is the one that is kind of like, it's putting a question out there that is an interesting one. And I'm like, but obviously leaning into that in the way that they do, in its context with the other two, it just becomes, again, this kind of very hopeless, gray, red, cynical way to look at things, where it's just like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, mitigate the damage, I guess, fuck you, right? And you kind of are hoping that you and the adventure that you're on and the characters that you're rolling with and the attitude you have, which is defiant, will lead to a conclusion that makes it sense so that the virtues that the characters have been looking at you for, that you've been displaying throughout the course of this journey, have a payoff and have a purpose. But also, you've presented an insurmountable foe in the form of the Reapers with unknowable, unstoppable power, right? So I'm like, what could you do there? And I think what would feel satisfactory to me is if you rolled through that ending with literally no choice ending involved. You are going to be presented with the destroy ending as the means of stopping the Reapers. This is what we built up the entire thing for. This is what we're doing it for. This is why you fought Tim and stopped Saren, right? And Tim wants ultimate control, and Saren wants to give ourselves over and become one with the Reapers. But regardless of that, you're fighting to stop them, right? And take that idea and then play with the negativity of that, which is the core that we know is awful about that, is that Geth, Edie, and all synthetic life get sacrificed, even though they're innocent bystanders in the process. And that should become the part of the game that we zoom in on, hyper focus on the tragedy of that and or the buildup of that. And that should be where your choices, the character you've been, the things you've said, all reflect in, for example, how the Geth would feel about that, or how Edie would feel about that. And I think that choice, the pathway being set to red, but the way that synthetic life, having their voice involved in that decision, could make that an interesting way to wrap the whole story up. Because if the choices you made and the way you created a something for Edie to learn from, and something for Legion to want to emulate to some degree, and then there's a moment here where you kind of turn to them and you're like, this thing is forcing us to sacrifice your existence.
Yeah.
And to hear from them about how they would feel about that ending and how they would feel about that, right? And something where...
Yeah, I wonder what the Geth would have had to say.
That's it.
About, there's a threat of the Reapers and it's menacing us as well, but we have a solution that will eliminate them and us. And this sacrifice, how do you stand with it?
Right? Could you have a moment where you're like, I'm absolutely not doing that. And they're like, fuck you, you have to do it. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves to make sure this happens. We're not, you know what I mean? We're not going to let you not do it because we think that it's worth it, because that's what they believe in based on the choices you've made up until that point. Or even Edie having her own version of that. Or, you know what I mean? And something where, essentially the struggle becomes about that, about the synthetic life and sacrificing itself, or perhaps learning from your renegade traits, right? And being like, no, actually, we do not want to die. We deserve to live. Why should we, we fought for our independence. We came this far just to, you know what I mean? And playing around with everything you've taught them and shown them and all the decisions you made within the context of sacrificing synthetic life to achieve a fucked up galaxy, that's Reaperless nonetheless, right? I think that's the best possible way you could have targeted that story's conclusion. And maybe the best version of it is one where in the end, you win some, you lose some, and you make it out of there, and you have that situation where the control ending goes off, but that the Geth and Edie and synthetic life that had a voice in the matter, we're absolutely gonna do this, and we're gonna sacrifice ourselves in that way, and you're like, oh fuck, right? And there's this kind of goddamn, we'll never, you want to hold on to that sacrifice in your heart. And you're like, these are the best, I can't believe that they did it that way. Or maybe even Shepard tries to not do it, and they go around him and do it anyway. You know what I mean? Something where you make the ethical choice, but they are like, no, we're not even going to let you consider that, because this is just not even a question. Okay. something like that would be really like it would be a bittersweet but ultimately like satisfactory way for things to have played out. And the Reapers are the big question the whole time, and you just focus in on that tragedy, you know, the most interesting question left behind, and you don't fucking frame it with a stupid Vancouver child, and you don't frame it with the bullshit of Tim not having any answers for you. In fact, why not even have like if Tim is going to represent the pathway that you didn't pick in the green ending, have that discussion with him. Have Tim like basically spell the green ending out for you, and then like make it as tempting as possible in a Melon's Data-esque way, right? Make me sit here and go, ooh, but Tim's green ending though, right? And then, or Tim's blue ending rather, or Saren's green ending for that matter, right? Like have that sell, and then you talk that point down, and you have a conversation where you can be like, no, actually that's fucked up because A, you are now the sole arbiter of what is good in the universe and what controls everything, and you determine the rules. Again, blue fascism as I called it, or green, where you just completely remove all context of freedom and all volunteer. You know, there's no volunteering, and you have been violated. You have no consent in the matter. Your autonomy has been taken away. Join the fucking hive mind, right? Like these types of situations being presented to you as like, look at the peace that could be achieved, but then you get to talk that down, would make those endings, the hypothetical versions of those, better as you make it to the one where you're like, well, then we're left with this one, but how do the people that we're sacrificing feel about that, right? And then, as I'm saying this right now, as I'm just kind of like, right, you could have a moment where via communication with synthetic life in that decision, you literally ask the ghost of a trillion dead souls how they feel about what you're about to do. You can literally almost do the metaphorical thing that Javik was implying by talking to those that are to be sacrificed about how they feel. And that echo right there would make the whole thing really fucking good, you know? So it's not that it's impossible. And again, I'm not a writer. I don't know how to fucking make that sound good. I don't have the lines or the, you know what I mean? I don't have the way to script that out. Yeah. But when you hit those kinds of little tones and you make it so that like what you did mattered, your choices mattered, and they play out in a way where it's going to affect the things that we care about, the people, the emotions, the relationships, right? But the idea of like, yo, are we stopping the Reapers? Abso-fucking-lutely. That's what we came here to do, right? That feels like one way that they could have went with it. And I hope that makes sense. Okay. Do you know what I mean? That's it. That's the thing. Is like that is a non-cynical way to hit the same point of that story, I think, and like pull it through with a little bit of hope, you know? Yeah, that's what I thought. And so I'm like, okay, I've cemented that. I think that's what I think could have happened. There you go. That's the thought. Put it all right. Okay. Now that I've tried it out here, I can. That was the recap, and then I'll go back over this on the podcast. Yeah, when I have to summarize. Yeah, I've had a chance to do a trial run, and then we'll go back over this thing. Okay, segment.